Welcome back to the Fourth Way Podcast. It is time to wrap up yet one more season in this podcast. We've spent quite a number of episodes on the idea of simplicity, trying to make a somewhat logical case. We've kind of built on simplicity, talking about issues of technical simplicity, like both in terms of technique as well as technology, monetary simplicity, busyness, hurry, Sabbath, rest, all those sorts of things. So we've kind of dealt with a lot of themes and hunkered down in some of those various areas over this season. And now we're at a point where I feel like I have definitely not exhausted the topic of simplicity, but I've covered a lot of bases. And I'm sure that there's going to be more to say over the years, and I'll add to this season a little bit. And I am going to continue to add to this season with resources. So for the next, 15 or 20, whatever weeks it is, we're going to be going through 3 different books to kind of provide you with some other perspectives that help us to understand simplicity a little bit more. But as far as my portion where I expound on some things, we're pretty much done. But in this episode, what I do want to do before we close out on that is I want to draw some conclusions. I want to kind of wrap things up and tie everything together. So the big thing I would like to point out, and I've said this several times throughout the season, is that when you think about your own life, one of the things that we're all seeking is meaning and purpose. And there are people who feel like they've lost that meaning and purpose, and that can lead to a lot of different things. In our society, it can lead towards violence towards others, right? People grasping at control, or get these lose-lose situations. If my life's bad, I'm going to make your life bad. If I don't have purpose, I'm going to take away your purpose. We've got mass shootings, things like that, school shootings. And then, of course, like suicide and just taking one's own life. So we're all searching for meaning. But if you look through history, if you think about, not even through history, but if you look at the world today and you say, who is the average person in the world today? And the average person is going to be somebody with a pretty low income, and it's going to be somebody in a not very powerful situation. And, I think of like just a rural farmer, right? Just a nobody peasant. And probably today it wouldn't be a farmer. It'd be more like somebody living in a city, right? In a not very nice part of a city. Somebody living close to poverty, if not in poverty. And then if you extrapolate that throughout history, we live in a time in one of the wealthiest times in history. If you think about the average person throughout history, their life was, by all appearances, was nothing. It was worthless. It was pointless. They didn't go anywhere. They didn't do anything. They didn't become anybody, right? And so that to me it doesn't sit with my belief in who God is and the fact that we are created in the image of God and we are all valuable. And so when I come to the idea of simplicity, it really, I'm not going to say it's the gospel, but it sure is a significant component of the gospel, it seems to me. Think about all the simplicity that's involved in the gospel, right? Of Jesus being the king. I have faith. I trust and obey, right? Just this believe and follow. That's simple in a sense. Or if you think about what God calls you to do, He doesn't call you to become the greatest person. In fact, He calls you to the opposite. He says the least, right? The widow's mite. The widow who gave her mite, she's amazing. Well, anybody can do that. I mean, anybody could, in theory, do that, right? We all have the capacity because we all have something, and therefore we can give it away. Jesus doesn't tell us to go acquire things. He tells us to, sell our things and give to the poor, or to lay down our lives. We can all do that. Anybody can do that. And Kierkegaard, if you were around for the Purity of Heart is to One Thing, or if you've listened to episodes where I reference him, right, Kierkegaard talks about that a lot, or at least in one really poignant part, where he talks about everybody is exactly the same distance away from that greatness. And everybody is one step, just following the step of repentance and faithfulness. We all have the ability to be faithful, whether you are a king or whether you are somebody who is burdened with a life of suffering and seeming triviality. We all are one step away, our next step, from being great and doing good. And that's because of this simplicity, the simple fact that what God calls us to is faithfulness. But what ends up happening is we kind of view meaning and purpose and faithfulness as being kind of the opposite of that. We complexify things, right? We complicate things. Christian nationalists will complicate things by saying, no, we can't really be faithful because that faithfulness would actually hinder us from achieving the ends of God. So therefore, we have to be unfaithful in some ways, do some things that are dirty and unjust and all that, because we need to accomplish something for God. We need to grasp at something for God. And so therefore, they complexify things and add to the gospel of simplicity and of just faith. You have people who seek power through other means, not just political means. You have people who are, a lot of us, just trying to accrue money. Right? If I just have a little bit more, I'll be comfortable. All of these types of things that we do to complicate our lives and to add complexity into our lives is just antithetical to the gospel of Jesus, the gospel of hope. That is hope for the person in the ghetto and the rural farmer, but is something that so many of us who live more in luxury and in abundance have difficulty seeing because of the way that we complicate things. But if most people are to have hope, then simplicity has to be true. Simplicity has to be a vital component to what it means to have meaning. Because if simplicity is not true, if we have to accomplish something, if we have to become great, if we have to accumulate, if we have to garner power, then the vast majority of people right now, and the vast majority of people throughout history, 99.9% of the people who have ever lived have lived meaningless lives. Now, maybe that's true. Maybe 99.9% of people have lived meaningless lives, right? My disdain for that fact just would not prove it wrong. But there's something inside of us that just says that can't be. We've talked, though, in some of our more recent episodes about the idea of purpose and how we get this purpose. Because there's a lot to the idea of simplicity that I think keeps people from recognizing the truth of simplicity as being a very significant component to the gospel, to meaning, to Christianity. And I think that's because to understand that we have purpose, and where that purpose is sourced, is to understand that we are tools, right? We are instruments that are wielded. We were created for a certain thing, right? With certain desires and certain aims, and we will be fulfilled by certain things, by accomplishing those sorts of things, by pursuing those sorts of things. And key in my mind is the idea of community between God and humanity, community between nature and humanity, and community between humanity and humanity, right? The relationships of the garden seen in Genesis. And when you think about that, right, our goal, and that this is summed up in the commandments, to love God and love others. And if we do those things, if we do love God, we will love others, and we will be an instrument in their lives that serve them. And likewise, they will be an instrument that serves us, not objectified by us. We don't objectify them and we wield them, but they lay down their lives for God, who uses them as an instrument in our lives. And that's not, you can get all masochistic, and you can think that this is terrible and tyrannical, as somebody like Richard Dawkins might think that God would use people like this. But this God who asks us to be instruments showed that he himself was an instrument who laid down his life to be wielded for us, right? And so we have to ask ourselves, where does meaning and purpose come from? Can we create our own through money, through power, through whatever? Or must we find our purpose, a purpose that was infused into us and not something that we can just create, but something that we discover and embrace? So if we have that view of purpose, then understanding simplicity and how it would lead to community and love and meaning and fulfillment, it just makes a lot more sense. It doesn't make it easier, but it can make sense, which might be a good first step towards engaging in it. And once I start to engage in simplicity, it helps me to recognize that it doesn't matter if I'm an artery or a vein or a capillary. I'm integral to the functioning of the body. I can provide service to people, and I can lift people up. I can encourage people. I can help people. And likewise, others can help me. And it draws me closer to others, to relationship. And in that, it draws me away from things like the accrual of wealth as being a goal, or the accrual of power, especially power over other people, because I have now created legitimate, real, deep community through my embracing of my instrumentality. And really, that's the only lasting thing that we can do, right? Is foster relationships. It reminds me of when we had the episode on the Sabbath. Heschel, I think was his name, Abraham Heschel, where he talked about the best investment, or the only way we can conquer time is in time. He talked about all the ways we try to conquer time with space, right? Get a bigger house, get more physical money, which now it's digital, but you know what I mean. Pile up more money. We try to conquer with space, win elections, right? More blue states, more red states, more people. We try to win time by conquering space. But according to Heschel, and this concept of the Sabbath that he impacts, the only way to conquer time is in time, in the moment. And moments are spent with individuals. Moments are spent in relationship, creating memories, and sharing emotions and bonding. We conquer time in time. It's the only thing that lasts, and it's the only way to conquer time. So when you recognize that relationships are really the conquering of time, and really where value lies, and really how we unpack our meaning and our value as we serve other people, right? In relationship, we are conquering time in time. Armies have long recognized this concept of the importance of conquering relationships. We all know the phrase, winning the hearts and minds, right? It's something that armies have maybe not long sought to do. A lot of times people just conquered and used brute force. But there were definitely armies who tried to win the hearts of the people in various ways. In the Revolutionary War, I was just listening to a couple books on the Revolutionary War in the United States. And it was fascinating learning things that I'd never heard before, just about the way that the British would strategize and figure out where was the Tory population the heaviest, and they would try to conquer areas and then anticipate that the masses would rise up for them, and then they'd kind of have this snowball of people joining their army. And so armies have long known that when you're fighting a guerrilla-style war, what you want to do is you want to try to get the people on your side. Whether that's in Iraq or Afghanistan or any of the other wars that the United States has waged in the last couple decades as well, hearts and minds has been something that we have tried to win. But we've tried to win it through the conquering of space rather than through relationship. And that's where, when you look at Jesus and you look at the incarnation, it's so clear that winning hearts and minds comes by conquering time in time. And Jesus spent 30 years of his life doing seemingly nothing, right? Obviously he was doing something, but we don't know what he was doing, and it certainly seems like he wasn't doing miraculous things during that time. He was just biding his time. He was just living as a human. What was he doing, right? Why didn't he get to the good stuff earlier? Why didn't he heal people or do miracles? Or why didn't he go to the cross sooner? But he was engaging in humanity. Like, he was living out as a human to be able to sympathize with us, as Hebrews talks about it. And he was building relationships. He was loving other people. He wasn't doing nothing. He just wasn't doing anything that seems important to us. He wasn't being powerful, it seemed. He was just living and loving and experiencing life. And that, to me, is just a picture of pure simplicity. This Philippians 2, that Jesus would leave his throne in heaven. He would come down. He would spend 30 years in the backwoods of a conquered territory, doing seemingly nothing, and then spend 3 years with a bunch of fishermen and tax collectors and revolutionaries and just wandering around the countryside for the most part. And then willingly, as an instrument, die a torturous death. Like, that is just absolutely amazing. And it seems weak, and maybe it seems foolish, but if your heart has been conquered by Jesus, then you know that it just makes so much sense. You know that life is meaningless when you are not an instrument. You know that life is meaningless when you pursue all of these vain efforts that will just dissipate in the next few decades anyway. Yet, like Ozymandias, so many of us, most of the time, we are trying to etch our names and our figures into stones that are just going to waste away into the desert, to be, at one point in the future, looked at one final time and remembered no more. That is the fate of most people who are trying to accumulate and conquer time with space. So this season, my challenge to you is to use what you've learned as a stepping stone to reflect on your life, to practice virtues of things like patience, and to love others, and to view yourself not as somebody who is deserving of people's affection, and not objectifying other people for your power and your glory and your advancement, but to see yourself as somebody who is an instrument who conquers time in time. I hope this season was helpful to you. It's still a huge challenge to me, and something that I struggle with every moment of the day. That's all for now. So peace, and because I'm a pacifist, when I say it, I mean it. podcast is a part of the Kingdom Outpost Network. Please check out the links below to find other great podcasts and content related to nonviolence and kingdom living.